I know that this is going to probably sound weird to a lot of people out there, but my client is actually the venue. It is never the couple. The couple is my couple, and they are the couple for 5 hours, and they are my client, and I will take care of them to the high heavens. But when they leave, I am actually standing inside of my client. And without that client, I don't work.
You're listening to the Venue RX podcast.
What's up, everyone? Jonathan here with the Venue RX, and on this show we are passionate about documenting and sharing best practices around owning, operating, and managing world-class wedding venues. And we don't just talk to wedding venues, this is event venues as well. We have a number of different types of shows that we do here on this channel. We talk to venue owners, we talk to wedding and event industry pros, there's some solo content as well. And so it's a really fun place where we can kind of curate all of this knowledge and information that we get from so many really knowledgeable people in this industry. The show we have for you today is no exception at all. And I'm really excited. But before we jump into that, I wanted to say, if you are a first-time listener, thank you so much for being here. If you've listened to this show more than once, consider subscribing, consider sharing this with someone else. We don't grow the show by ads or really anything like that. It's just based on word of mouth. So I would definitely appreciate that, and the whole team here, we would appreciate that as we continue to grow this channel. All right, let's get to the show today. I have the pleasure of bringing on Fausto from Blue Elephant Events today. He is a wedding professional out of Maine, but his career really started in Philadelphia, and I'm excited to not only hear his story and how he started in this industry, but also the information that he has on venues, because he has an incredible touch point with so many of those. So Fausto, thank you so much for being here today.
My pleasure. Thank you for having me. I appreciate it.
I'm really excited about this conversation because just based on what we just talked about before you got on, and then some of the stuff that I was looking at in the notes and the different websites, you work with like an insane amount of venues. Is that correct?
We do. It's actually my bread and butter. So I know that this is going to probably sound weird to a lot of people out there, but my client is actually the venue. It is never the couple. The couple is my couple, and they are the couple for 5 hours, and they are my client, and I will take care of them to the high heavens. But when they leave, I am actually standing inside of my client. And without that client, I don't work.
That's a really interesting perspective, and I love that. Let's just take it to a whole nother level, though, and help us understand, what is Blue Elephant Events? What do you guys provide for venues and for couples?
Blue Elephant Event is a full production company. So we have planners, catering. We also own a wedding magazine in our state that we work with the state of Maine to produce. And we also broker venues. We have 89 venues we do business with in the state of Maine, 5 of them that we handle personally, 2 of them that are operated only and solely by us, that we make all of the money, and then 2 that are exclusive. Wow. So they have to do everything through us.
Wow. So you have a little bit of experience with venues, right?
A little bit.
A little bit. Can you take me back where you were when you got started in this industry, and what kind of is your background before getting in this industry, and kind of just give us some of the key takeaways for your career up till now?
So I started in Philadelphia, actually, pretty much like everybody. I started in my parents' basement. I was working in the food industry since a kid. And so I was oh my God, I can make really good money if I were doing catering and working in church basements and, the usual that everybody did 30 some years ago. And, the money was coming in, but you're also 17, 18, and you're wasting it very quickly. And, you don't do business the way you should. I sort of kind of left that behind and went to work for 2 women who actually either took pity on me and gave me my start in my career in Philadelphia. And I worked for them for about 10 years. And I literally sat there and said, I better use this as my college. And I learned everything I possibly could about this industry. I mean, everything. And so we developed a lot of venue relationships in Philadelphia. As a matter of fact, we created the Philadelphia Picnic Program at the Philadelphia Zoo. And Lancer had taken it over, I think maybe 20 years ago or something like that. I think they're there now, if they're still there. When the New Jersey State Aquarium broke ground, we were the first company on board, and we remained there after a list of preferred professionals went from 32 to 15 to 10 to 5 to 3 until the Marriott took it over. So we remained literally on that because of the way we treat our venues. We treat them with the utmost respect, and we learn everything about that venue. And one of my biggest properties is in Bernathen, Pennsylvania, which was called Caronwood, and it was built in 1895 by Career and Hastings. And when we started working there, it was pretty much sort of the first floor. They would open, they would close because they were renovating it. So it took about maybe 4 years to renovate it from top to bottom, but I remained part of their team for the entire time until I left Philadelphia, to the part where the Board of Governors actually gave me a letter saying how much business I had brought them, because I would sell them first before selling myself, because I needed you to book it so that you could book me. And so that's how I got people to sort of fall in love with the venue and then fall in love with us.
Wow, what an amazing way to partner with venues, because then there's this incredible relationship where they're getting the business, you're getting the business, they're referring you business, of course, because you're bringing them business. That's huge. And I think you've emphasized it more in the last couple minutes that we've been talking than I've ever heard a caterer ever emphasize it. So kudos.
It's funny because when I left out on my own after those 10 years with the two women and I opened my own company in Philadelphia, I remember going, oh my God, how am I going to do this if I'm blocked at every venue from the other company? And although I gave my word that I would never touch their clients, venue are a different story. So I went to venues and I said, hey, I'm starting this. And I remember a true story. This is at Appleford Mansion. At the time, her name was Penny that ran the place. I remember her erasing 2 people to put me on.
Wow.
Off the list. And that wasn't just because I was brought, that was because I took care of their property. And especially when you are going into a historic mansion or museum, which my career has allowed me. I mean, we used to work at a mansion in Philadelphia, actually the outskirts of Pennsylvania. And that housed one of the most impressive medieval art collection. They had a libation bowl that dated before Christ walked the earth. I was the first person to ever do events out of there. Pretty impressive. So for me, and I'm not bragging, what I'm saying is if you treat the venue with the most respect that they look at it, they're going to literally, even though they don't, for instance, at one location in the city of Portland, they're not allowed to sort of say who to use because it's, federal ground or city ground. They'll just go like this and hold the name and point to me without actually saying it. So it's a good relationship that you build with a venue.
So I want to keep going through your career, but I just want to take a pause here really quick. How does a vendor, just because we're talking about historic buildings, the Philadelphia area is absolutely full of them. East Coast, obviously, there's so much, there's history here as well on the West Coast where we're located, but I mean, the East Coast, when you think about the history of the United States, so much is there. Mm-hmm. What are some things that a vendor, so DJ, caterer, planner, etc. What are some of those things that they can do to really show and prove from the get-go that they are interested in taking care of a venue? What does that actually mean?
Learn the space. So for instance, if a particular historic mansion or museum has parquet floors, don't roll your equipment over it. Don't drag a 60-inch round table through it. Carry it, pick it up and carry it. That goes a long way. For instance, if the wall...
Sorry, what type of floors?
Parquet, like a parquet wood floor, like a parquet floor.
I didn't know that term. Very cool.
Yeah, so you have to sort of kind of understand that is what they are. They're not focused in on the party. The party is to generate income to keep that museum or historic home open. So to them, it's a way of turning it into I hate saying the word wedding palace, but it's the reality. And so when you come in and you don't care about their facility, they're not going to care about you, and they're not going to refer you, and they won't let you back in. So those are the things that I have witnessed. For instance, sometimes we'll see caterers who have left the kitchen dirty, or, we photograph that. So we have a system, and anybody's welcome to use the system. I photograph in and I photograph out, no matter what we're doing. And I have you sign me out at the end of an event. Don't call me on Monday because you were there. So we have the proof how we left it. And that's a really good way of doing it, especially in this day and age. And I think, there are some, not a lot of DJs, but some of them are unwilling to go up to the mezzanine to play at one of our venues. So we are like, all right, there's 20 other DJs. This is our rule here. You have to go up to the mezzanine. You're not going to eat footprint of our ballroom with all of your equipment. So, and you just have to sort of kind of remember. And one thing I always say to somebody, especially if you're a preferred professional, I said, how did you get your lead? Oh, well, the venue gave it to them. I said, well, then the venue is actually your client. Because if the venue fed you the lead, you didn't bring it to them. They gave it to you. So you have two people to take care of, not only the client, but the person who referred you.
Let's dig in on this a little bit, because you're on both sides of this now. You're not only a vendor, right, preferred vendor, you have venues that you actively are the manager of, owner of, whatever, right? So help me understand, now that you're looking at it from both sides, what do you do when you have a vendor who maybe you really like, you really enjoy working with them, but there are some things that kind of have crept up, maybe even in the relationship over time. You've got comfortable, right? How do you handle things like that? Situations like this?
We've had conversations, and we'll send like a note and say, hey, don't forget that you have to do it this way. These are the rules. We create handbooks for all of our facilities, so you'll get them ahead of time and you'll know. And besides that, by the minute you walk in the door, you're told what time the music has to be off and where you're going. So there's no explanation that, if the music is off at 10 because there's a sound ordinance, you are off at 10 or we will unplug you. I know it sounds kind of harsh. Do not go past the time that you're told, especially if you're told in an email. And those are the ways. I do a 3 strikes you're out sort of kind of policy at our venues. I mean, everybody can, 1 or 2 is an off, but the third time you're just deliberately not doing what you're supposed to be doing. And I have to answer to certain people too. So come on, this is a joint thing that we're doing together, and nobody should be headmaster at the location. We're all as a team.
Totally. Are you using rules and regulations documents? Are people signing off on something on paper, on site?
We have not gone to the part of signing. I do it more on a trust factor. I know that there are a lot of venues who have you sign a code of conduct. We're not children. So to me, it's easier to say, look, 3 times, we're done. I don't care if the client wants you. I'd rather risk losing the client than have you disrespect us one more time in our house. It's as simple as that.
That makes a lot of sense. I love that. Okay, so let's go back, because we didn't finish with your story, the story of your career, right? So you're getting into venue. So at what point does Blue Elephant become a reality? Is that the company that you started, or did it change a couple times?
We started, in Philadelphia with a different company. And when we started Blue Elephant actually in Maine. We had adopted our daughter and moved to Maine in 2007. It was either Maine or Florida, but Florida is such a crazy state that 2 men with a baby, they would have literally taken her from you. So we chose, not to get political, so we chose Maine. My partner's and my husband's father's a doctor and his mom's a nurse. So it was an easy solution to move here. So we opened the business. And let me tell you, I don't know how I'm still standing, because I weathered 9/11 in Philadelphia, where we lost so much work that weekend. People lost their lives. I'm not saying, but business is business sometimes, and you have to think that way. And then I moved to Maine with a newborn baby, opened a business, sunk all of my money into this area, which was not developed yet, because Maine didn't explode until 2014. And then the recession hit. And I was like, oh my God, what the hell have I done? And then stream forward, after literally getting back on our feet by 2014 and everything getting like really going and everybody's living large, COVID hit. So I'm like, oh my God. So, but yeah. I'm still standing 6 years later.
Well, and you have experience now with different markets, right? Down markets, up markets. Yeah. Can you give us some insight, as someone who has, longevity in this career or in this industry? Can you give us some insight into maybe some things that you, looking back, would have done to weather these economic storms?
I would not have taken on so much so quickly. I would have slowed it down a little bit. I think that was one of the hardest parts, and I would not have spent so much so quickly. As we were making it, we were spending it not on personal stuff, but quickly on the business. That really hindered it a little bit. I think I would have gone a little bit slower, although 11 years to make the business sustainable was a good practice overall. I just would have changed a couple of things along the way.
I'm curious, because you seem like so many entrepreneurs I know. You're a fire starter. I can tell you're a go-getter. Would you be able to do that? Because it seems like, I feel like you're the type of guy who wants to go fast, no?
No, I think I need to, well, this is all the Cuban part of me. It's so funny. I talk very fast. I talk fluent Spanish, but I taught myself never to show my accent, which is really funny because I've been on diversity panels and we've talked about that. I said, I've never been ashamed about being gay. I was more ashamed to be in Spanish. And I think that that's why I hide my accent but this energy is mostly the Latin part of me. No, my husband will probably say, no, you would do it the exact same way. And I do tend to believe that, but I wish I could go back and say, slow this down. Don't buy this. Don't get the truck because there's this recession on its way. And I was like, nah, but when COVID, I did slow down and I did watch everything we spent and we did keep everything at a minimal. And we were very careful about the jobs that we took during COVID.
Yeah, that makes sense. I was asking you because I feel like, folks listening to this that are in our industry, serving couples, they are fire starters, right? They're entrepreneurs, they're small business owners. They want to go fast, they want to grow their businesses. And sometimes you need that consistent reminder that like, hey, play the long game, slow down a little bit. Even though it feels hard to slow down and you want to look at all the things and you want to add all the tools and all of that, sometimes it's really good to just slow down, execute really well on what you're doing and build, even though it's hard. I know, and I'm speaking to myself.
Slow and steady wins the race, That's what they say.
Yep, very true, very true. Okay, so
that's how I sometimes look at it.
Tell me more about Blue Elephant. So then you go to Maine, and this is that 16-year period, right, where you've had...
So we moved to Maine. We land actually our first exclusive. And what I always tell people, they're like, well, how do you get into the venues? I said, get your ear to the ground. Make sure that you know every person in this industry, regardless whether if you're catering, know every planner, every photographer, every DJ, every band. So the minute I entered this state, I knew everybody who were the players. And there wasn't many because a lot of these venues didn't exist. So I'll give you so you can understand. There were no Chiavari chairs in this state. I had to buy my own because I couldn't rent them. I had to get them from Boston. That's how behind the wheel we were. And I love living here, but I'm going to be honest, in 2007, we were behind the wheel. So I had heard about this particular venue that was looking to do events. So I immediately beelined to there and said, hey, here's my experience. Here's what I've done, blah, blah, blah. Would you mind turning it over to me as an exclusive? And I've had that venue since 2008. They actually signed on board with us and I still have it. It's the largest ballroom in Portland, outside of a hotel. And it's a historic building. It's part of the Portland Masonic Temple. And it's my longest in this state. And I've become a Mason. You do what you have to do in order to make them happy. You know what I mean? So I think a lot of people forget that. And when you go, don't just hit somebody with like, hey, I want you to put me on your list. Nobody wants to be told what to do. There's a way that you can go in there and caress somebody into saying, hey, I love this venue. I know the history of it. It was built in 1911. The USO used to dance here. That Tiffany chandelier that hangs in the Scottish Rite Room. Learn the building before walking in and demanding something from them. Put a little bit of care into it. That's all.
I was going to say, how'd you find that lead? For someone listening to this right now who's just like, I want to do that, and they're inspired. How did you go about doing that?
I do a lot of networking and I keep my ear to the ground on everybody. And somebody had mentioned it. I just got to the door first. That's all. I didn't steal it or take it from somebody. I just made the effort to get in my car and get down there and email and call. And then when they said, hey, come on in, we're really interested. And that sort of kind of pushed me into what we were doing. And then all of a sudden, all of these venues started opening around me. And then one of the things that we did was we created, we do a lot of style shoots, but I don't just do a style shoot to do a style shoot. I do a style shoot that has a purpose. Number one is the venue opening brand new. Okay, let's do it there. Let's get them a publication of a feature in a magazine, not mine, but let's find them one. So we have that guaranteed. And we turn it into a networking party where I become the host of somebody else's venue. And now I am showcasing your property. And I have gotten everybody to partake in this. And we have about 70 to 80 people who show up in the industry who are now, it's all eyes on your property. And it's a win for all of us. And then we create your preferred professional list for the venue. So I can have a hand in creating who's there.
That's so huge. And when you're the host, when you're the MC, when you're the person who's you are the person who's on the stage, you're getting the attention.
Mm-hmm.
I
Good,
love
bad, or indifferent. There are a lot of people who think I do too much, and I hate the term stay in your own lane. Lanes were meant to be driven. I'm just going to say it because other people are afraid to say it. If you're in the slow lane, you will get passed every time. And I am in an industry where I have 10 full-time employees that need to be fed and rely on their paychecks and make a lot of money from us. And I don't begrudge the money they make. They work hard, but I need to do a lot of these things in order to keep them all working. So, and we have 150 in the summer.
Wow. Because you're flexing up and flexing down with needs. Is that market really seasonal just because of where geographically you're located?
Not anymore. We're 4 seasons now. A lot of venues have added heat and air, so we're good. We're $1 billion industry in the state of Maine alone. It is $5 billion with tourism, $1 billion of it being the wedding industry, which feeds into hotels and restaurants. And when you think about destination weddings, because a lot of ours are destination weddings, so they're coming from California, New York, Chicago, you name it. We have a client who's coming in from Canada. They have some sort of connection to Maine, which is the strangest thing to me sometimes. And they're either, they love the venue, they've camped near the venue. It's just, they just come here. And so that's why we're able to Lord, stay open all year round. We've been working January, February. We have events in March, April. So then we go really full throttle May to December 9th. It's completely booked. We book a year in advance. So all of our venues are already booked. There's a couple that still have openings, but we're done. We can't take anything else at any of my venues. So I'm actually working on 2024.
Wow. I was going to ask that. How do you think about releasing pricing for dates? Do you do some sort of rolling cohort month by month, different dates open up? Is it a year that you open
The price
up?
is the price. I never really thought that was interesting, to select pricing based on the month. If you're having a wedding, it's a wedding no matter. The same amount of work goes into it. The price is the price. I do differently if it's a social event, if it's a corporate event, or if it's a fundraiser for a nonprofit, and there's a nonprofit fee. Those are the only breaks that we do. Sometimes we do military, depending on which venue you're at and how it was structured. But we don't change the pricing based on the time of year. I never really understood why venues do that, because it's the same amount of work. What I do find interesting, especially with venues recently, is that they're concerned how many people are coming. I said, but you don't charge per head. So if you're $15,000, you're $15,000 regardless. You know what I mean? So what are you worried about, whether it's a luxury event or Susie from down the street is having a DIY event? You made your $15,000. There you go. Unless it's always for a magazine. The reality is we need to keep the doors open at all of our venues. So to me, rent it as long as that check clears. It's just, that's the way it should operate. And I think a lot of people put too much emphasis on it being luxury. But if you break it down this way, say you have $100,000 wedding or 200, 300,000, whatever your luxury point is, I think that anything $1 million and up is luxury. Anything below it, like William P. Miller once said, who's this phenomenal planner in California, anything above $500,000, luxury. Anything below it, good budget. So it's a good way to look at it. So with that said, if you take, say, a $300,000 wedding and they opted for a DJ and the DJ happened to be $2,000, ask the DJ if it was a luxury event to him. Yes, overall, what he was seeing is luxury, but it's the same price as if he would have done the Elks Lodge or a fireman's hall. You see what I mean? It doesn't make a difference to him because he's getting paid the same amount of money for 5 hours.
Do you have any insight for wedding pros on that? You're talking in the luxury market here really quick. We're kind of jumping to that topic, but I love it. If someone hears that and it's like, oh my God, $500,000, $300,000, $200,000, they're used to a $20,000 or $30,000 wedding budget, right? Are there, and essentially you made the point. It's the same service, whether they're at the Elks Lodge, like you said, or it's the same service. What are some of those key points that they can emphasize to kind of offer more of the things that the luxury client is looking for?
If it's a luxury client, they're not coming to a venue. they're going to their private estate. Let's just be honest. They're not going to go to like I look at it like this. I said this, the big weddings that we have done that are sort of kind of non-disclosure events, they're always at somebody's private home. You know, I can say one, we did it at the guy who founded Cole Haan Shoes. We did it on his property for friends of theirs. He just let them use their property. That's where really money goes to. It's not going to go to a venue like ours, like any of ours that we have, just being honest about that. Because when you look at it, by the time you're said and done, an average cost of a wedding in the state of Maine, you're looking at anywhere between $100,000 to $175,000 for an average. Even though other publications say, oh, it's $28,000, those numbers are wrong, because we do $150,000 weddings every weekend if you add everything in. Yeah. So the money's here. So I think luxury goes to their own private homes and estates. There's a lot of money in Maine, and it's quietly tucked in different corners. But they come to Maine to have an experience like, I hate to say it this way, more casual. So they don't like to spend as much here. Makes
sense. It was interesting to me that you said you got involved in the Maine market before it really exploded. Mm-hmm. Do you still feel like there are markets like that in America that someone can get in that are, kind of like blue oceans, that haven't been tapped into yet?
Yes, 100%. 100%. I think the Midwest, because when I hear the numbers of what they're charging per person for food alone, it can change. And and I know it's a slow but scary change, but it can change. I mean, food is expensive now. Pricing has gone up. Staffing has gone up. The price of maintaining a venue with housekeeping has gone up. And especially if you have a venue that accommodates people to sleep there, you have more staff because now they're cleaning the rooms. So one of the things that we do for a couple of venues we have consulted with who rent it for the weekend, I said, do people sleep here? And they're like, no. I said, why are you losing 2 days? You're losing money. Friday, Saturday, and Sunday. If nobody's sleeping there, you need to be renting that Friday, Saturday, and Sunday. Now, if you want to discount it a little bit, discount Sunday, but Friday and Saturday, those are prime dates. Sunday, not so much. So I think the Midwest is an area that could potentially be blowing up right now.
From a venue perspective, or actually from a regional and kind of geographic perspective, are there some tells that you can say this area is poised for some growth versus an area that maybe is not going to experience growth for, 20 years, something like that? Are there some things that you specifically look at?
When I start hearing about people building venues, then I know the need is there. So so I've been hearing about these new venues that are popping up. There's one that actually just is getting ready to open up in Stanford, Connecticut. And I just read about it. And so I'm like, oh. And I know Connecticut is building up slowly. I just was out there recently to see a historic museum. And so not for us, just somebody asked me to go tour it because they're trying to work there more. So I did. So I did some reconnaissance for them. But, things like that. It's when you start seeing these things opening up, if a venue is opening up in several of them, then the market is right for planners, caterers, DJs, florists, because that's a telltale sign.
I'm curious though for venues, and that makes a lot of sense, because if the venues are there, then the business, you can kind of like follow that in if you're a vendor. But if you're a venue, are there some things that you feel like a venue should look at to know whether or a potential venue owner, right?
Find your 3 high-end caterers, and when I'm talking like 4 million and up. Okay. And if they're a 4 million and up company, you can do it. I mean, in Minnesota, there's a company that's huge out there and they make a lot of money. Minnesota, I would definitely open up there because you got a company that's, in the millions. So that's really target those, because not so much in the other preferred professionals in the industry, but you can tell with the catering part of it, because if a catering company is over 2 million and up, then the volume is there. So that's, if I were opening a venue, I would seek those out to see what value they are in their business.
I have to ask, and I'm so curious. I think the audience is going to dig this as well. But like, if you're thinking about another place that you would go right now, you would move your business. You would make that move that you were making in what you said 2014 or no?
2007.
Yeah, 2007. going to Maine, obviously you were thinking about some of the socioeconomic political things, right, as well. But just speaking from a business perspective, what state or what area would you be looking at for?
New Mexico.
Really?
Yeah, New Mexico.
Why?
I don't know. I've been keeping my eye on that location. Actually, to be honest with you, I think I'd move out of the country because I think there's a lot to be had in other parts of the world. But I think New Mexico is where I'd hit because I just been seeing this slow growth, and I'm like, okay, that has possibility. And people, I mean, there were some established places in Maine when we moved here, but not like there were today. Not like as of right now. We have 5 new venues coming online, not with us, but just general. And we're taking over 2 new ones. They haven't signed their contracts yet with us, but 2 new ones, one in Kennebunk and one in Scarborough. That's a pretty big deal. And so that's a lot. I think the pace is slower there, but I think the potential is there. So.
Fausto, something that has been fascinating to me through this entire discussion with you is the way that I feel like you really have your finger on the pulse of the industry locally there in your area, kind of on the East Coast. You mentioned a couple different states. How do you go about keeping your finger on the pulse and keeping your awareness up of what's happening in your industry?
I'm like a bad penny. I circulate everywhere. So I sit on the International Caterers Association board, which is the ICA. I'm part of the I'm part of the Leading Caterers of America, which is by invitation only. So we're all over. I founded the NACE chapter here in Maine because I've always been associated with NACE. So I founded it here in Maine. And I do speaking stuff because apparently I like to hear myself talk. So, and I am really, I'm gonna toot my horn for 2 seconds. I am really good about getting myself out there so people remember who I am. Good, bad, or indifferent. I will make you a lot of money. So leave all, if you don't like me because you think I take over too much stuff, leave that over here. I'd rather fill your pocketbook than playing a light game. The terminology friender is an interesting one to me. We don't go out for Christmas. You don't bring my daughter a gift for Christmas. So how are we frienders? This is a business transaction. I will give you business. You give me business. We're filling each other's pockets. That's the friendship I love. It's called Benjamins. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So I know I'm probably not everybody's cup of tea, but I'm okay with that. You know what I mean? But I will. To me, watching a historic mansion rise from the ashes, from being almost torn down to being saved, is much more impressive to me from my career, and seeing it salvaged, completely renovated from top to bottom using the same stuff that they quarried for the slate roof to the stones used. That to me is impressive. I love that because I no matter what you can say, I'm part of your history of that venue. So that, I mean, I don't think a lot of people feel that same passion as I do. I think I'm more passionate towards venue than every other component of the industry, because I'm so tied to the venues for 36 years. No matter where I'm at, it's always about the venue.
You're a catalyst for the growth of a lot of those places, which I think, again, to your point, the vendor, the friender relationship, whether someone likes you or not, they might like you, but still they're going to make a decision to go with someone who's going to put those Benjamins in their pocket, right? And especially with the level of care, attention to detail that I hear you having with, taking care of the floors and some of the different things, you're going to have longevity there because you are a catalyst for that growth.
I can tell you that there are a lot of venues in the state that literally have my footprint since day one. I mean, my favorite thing that sometimes when a client first comes into our conference room and they're like, well, do you know this venue? And I'm like, well, you got my name from the venue. Of course I know your venue, but I say that's my indoor voice. So I never say it out loud. I want to, but I have to sometimes watch myself because my husband always says, don't say it. I'm like, oh God. But I'm very proud of that part. It isn't bragging, but it's confidence in a way that you help this family succeed. And, there's a particular venue up in Norway, Maine. For some odd reason, every town is named after a country. There's Norway, there's Paris, there's Mexico, there's China. It's crazy. Belfast. So in Norway, this particular venue, when we took it over, we were exclusive. And once we got to a point, we went to preferred by choice. But everything that hangs in that house that's matted and framed when they come in for their tour to rent it has my name on it. And the same thing when we were working at the botanical gardens, all their collateral turned out to be my photographers for my events. There are ways of dominating something without ever anybody knowing it as a professional. And when your venue loves you, they'll do those things for you without ever letting anybody know. See, it's a win, not only for you, and you can't take all the work. So I'm just saying, I can't work at all these places, but your SEOs and your sort of your tangles or your spider webs that are out there are all through venues. So 98% of my business is literally the phone ringing from venues. I barely advertise.
That's incredible. You mentioned going from exclusive to preferred. What do you feel like is involved in a venue making that decision to go from exclusive to preferred catering or preferred list at all?
For some venues, I believe that it really is important to be exclusive. If you're historic in senses, like if you're in the Philadelphia market and you're in Rittenhouse Square and you're at exclusive places that really need a lot of attention to detail, go exclusive. For venues that are barn venues, it's better to be preferred. And so we knew when to cut ties and go, hey, let's just be preferred. It wasn't leaving them in a lurch because we put everything together. We literally gave them all the tools. I am still working there. I still do. I mean, I'm so close to the owners of that place that actually they just texted me earlier today about something, and we go back and forth on different things. So there's a relationship because they knew I wasn't in it just to take all the money. It's literally, I'm helping you, you're helping me in that kind of relationship. We had another venue like that we realized that the partnership that we had developed, which is our brokering one, wasn't the right fit for them. And although I could have stayed under contract and made all my money and just taken it, what I needed for them and what they needed was a general manager. So we hired the manager for the owner, placed the manager there. And then during COVID, what we realized what they needed help with was to sell it. They needed menus. So we created menus, let them price it however they want, as long as we got paid our money. So now I work with the venue. So our catering side works for the venue technically. They sell it, book it. We arrive, we do the food, we walk out the door. We had money coming in and out during COVID when everything else was failing, before PPP and before any of that stuff. So it was a win. Know when to cut your cords if you're exclusive. Know if it's not the right fit for the venue and you're doing more harm, go to preferred. They'll love you better.
Well, it's an unselfish choice because it's putting their
needs ahead of yours.
Yeah, totally. Which then is incredible goodwill.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, but it works. But it's goodwill because the outcome is going to be better for you in the long run. So it's a win-win. I'm not doing it because I'm a good-hearted person. I really am. But there's a win for me because now I have a better relationship. I'm going to get more work.
Yeah, you can be unselfish and still strategic. You can be
I struggle with that sometimes.
Okay, so I have one more question, and then we'll wrap up for today. This has been fascinating, though, because I think I'd like to have you back on kind of as we continue to go through this like post-COVID time. I guess actually I have two questions. So when COVID came and everything shut down, different places, different states obviously had different things. Here in California, we were shut down for a while. I know New York was shut down for a while. Midwest stayed or reopened, I guess, a little bit quicker than maybe other places. What things did you do to kind of help speed the recovery, especially as things started reopening? What are those things that you prioritize to get your venues and your partner venues on track?
I became the accidental activist. Is what I became. So what happened was my first gear was we needed to, number one, change everybody's contract. because the contracts were so outdated, meaning that everybody had the word deposit in it. That word does not exist anymore. Deposit is refundable. So we had to immediately make sure that everybody was on board with this. And it took a lot of doing. But what I did was I created the Postpone, Don't Cancel campaign. We got a bunch of people together safely. We photographed them all individually from the photographer and then mirrored all the photos together. That got about 198,000 people because everybody spread it everywhere. I was working with the Live Coalition. We were partnering because in California, there's a friend of mine, Julia, who we literally were working together to get the states open and literally sharing information. And every time we would hear something, we worked with the governor's office. We hired a lobbyist. And we actually put those numbers in front of the governor's office of how much money we wanted to open safely, but we had a harder time because out of everything that happened in every state, Maine got the worst of it because we had the Millinocket wedding, which killed 6 people from COVID. And that wedding hit Forbes. It was in people. I was getting calls from everywhere going, what the hell is happening in Maine? And I'm like, I'm trying to fix it. And so there was this renegade wedding that had happened, and we opened safely August 6th. And I remember that day because we were off. I've never had that much time off in this industry in 36 years. And so we worked diligently to just make sure that we were opening safely. We created COVID sort of guidelines with the governor's office, with FEMA, and we worked every day to get this open safely for everybody to get back to business, to a point where once we were able to do a 100-person wedding, it went back down to 50. And I remember going, I can't call this client and tell her at this particular venue, she can no longer. She went from 189 to 100 people, and now she's got to go back to 50. So I called the governor's office and the DECD and the CDC, and I said, I have an idea. Can it work? So they said, well, tell me. I said, what if we do 50 people in the morning from 12 o'clock to 4:30, the older folks do a sit down, get them out of there, fog the space, take all the linens, change everything. I made everybody double. So we did 2 weddings, same people, 2 different times. And from 7 to 11, had the younger people come in for a cocktail party. So it was a win. She got her 100 people just 2 times. She got different shots because the photographer was paid twice, 2 different cakes because both cakes had to be brought in and taken out. And linen, the rental company made it twice. So everybody made some money. So I not only thought about the client, but I thought about the vendors and the venue. So that's what we did during COVID. We became the accidental activist.
I like that. I like that a lot. Now that we're kind of the wave of the postponements and things like that have, for the most part, subsided, and you're looking into 2024, maybe even 2025, depending, it seems like the venues that you're at are booking up pretty well. What are you doing to kind of regain some equilibrium, and where is that sitting for you with the amount of events that you're doing per year? Obviously, it might vary based on venues, but what are you seeing kind of in your industry?
I think with venues right now, it's oversaturated with venues. I think we have too many. And the problem is that now venues are going, I have open dates, but there aren't enough preferred professionals to fill the dates. So now you're in this catch-22 where the venue is selling it because they need to make the money, but you don't have a florist, you don't have a DJ, you don't have a caterer, because all you see anymore is in search of. It's because the market is oversaturated. There are way too many of venues to cover that. There are people that went out of business. And so when 2020 hit with COVID, everybody who booked in 2019, that's the reality. They booked 2019 for 2020. Now they're pushed to 21. 21 moved to 22. 22 somewhat went into 23. We'll even out probably in 24, where you'll see a nice even. But the reality is we have to be on that sort of kind of looking at the horizon and going, oh shit, there's a recession coming probably in September. It's coming. We don't know how big it'll be because things are cyclical. So you have to sort of kind of keep that in the back of your mind. Save. What
is the impact of recessions? Because you've been through, there's been 2 kind of the 2008, obviously, big financial, real estate driven crash. 9/11 was something for sure. And then COVID was a little bit of a different thing because it was like a pandemic. So, do you feel like weddings are fairly recession proof?
I do. I think one thing that we'll always have is people need to get married. People want to get married, and people will always have a wedding. Your numbers will go down, and you'll see them more budget conscious of that. But I always tell people, especially in my industry, whether your venue or whatever part of this industry you're in, is look at Europe, because Europe sort of dictates what happens. And so if you look at Germany right now, they are really hitting hard right now with a recession that's there. And from what I hear from friends who have been in the industry for 200 years, who have hotels, venues, catering, food service, all of it, they're targeting almost like the Lehman years, which is 2008. And that's scary to hear because of the war. And so you have to look at that, because if you look at COVID, everybody's, oh, that's in Europe, that's in China, it's never going to hit here, it'll be 2 weeks, whatever, it's a cold. But nobody pays attention to what happens in the rest of the world. We're not this bubble that sits here completely safe of what happens. Everything hits us from different angles. So I do pay attention to the world. When it's wedding related, I pay attention all over, not just the United States.
Mm-hmm. I love that.
Because it really helps us keep our market.
So that was 4 questions wrapped into one. I actually do have one last question, believe it or not. So you're doing all these different things. You're speaking, you're part of these organizations, networking, you do all this different stuff, and you're also serving all these different venues. Sounds like you have a team. How do you prioritize your time to put yourself where you should be to continue growing your company?
Personally, with my time?
Yeah.
I get up in the morning and I go to the gym. And that hour and a half, nobody can disturb me. Like, I don't care. The house could be burning down. Don't call me. Don't call me. Don't care. Anything can wait. There is nothing important in the wedding industry that you need to talk to me with. Like, 24 hours is a good enough time to get back to you. Like I tell my clients when they first book here, what do you want from me? I said, because at the end of the day, and this is something I tell them all the time. I said, I want you to have fun in this process. Regardless whether you book my venue and you didn't book us for anything else, but you booked my venue, that's okay. But have fun with it. Your door is not going to open until the week of your wedding, pretty much on that Saturday. Flowers aren't going to be made. Food isn't going to be cooked. Food isn't even going to be delivered to the caterer to prep. The DJ isn't going to come. What are you worried about? I said, you're worried about because somebody put in your head that you have 9 months to worry about all this. If all your players are done, your major players are all intact, leave it alone. Worry about other things. This is not. So that's something I took on myself. At 5 o'clock, we shut down. My staff goes home. Everybody's done. Don't answer your phones. Don't answer anything. There's always another day. So wait till the next morning at 9. Because if everything else can shut down, why can't we? So that's how we keep ourselves from not going crazy and not killing somebody sometimes. And I don't say that because I'm advocating killing anybody. I'm just saying it really is a way that I take care of myself. And our daughter actually came up with a really good one. We have an extra car, and in that particular car, we're never allowed to talk about work, ever. Hence, it doesn't go out a lot. But
that's so cool, though, because it kind of gives you that place that, like, this is designated. We're going to do this. No, I love that. Well, Fausto, thank you so much for coming on the show. If people are interested in your venues, where you're going to be speaking, any of those sorts of things, where should they connect with you?
You could do Fausto at faustoblue.com.
Okay.
Beautiful. Or Blue Elephant Catering at gmail.com.
Beautiful. Awesome. Well, thank you so much again for coming on the show today. It was an absolute pleasure, and I look forward to talking to you again.
Yeah, my pleasure too.